reservation. So I called and they were excited that we were willing to bring kids out to do work. And what we discovered is that Remember is the longest nonprofit that works out on the Pine Ridge Reservation. The Pine Ridge Reservation is the size of Connecticut. It is Oglala County, and it has the poorest, it is the poorest economic county in the country. Lowest. Per capita. Yeah. 50% of the people have diabetes. There is a 200% increase in youth suicides. It is a very sad place to live for those of us that look at it from the outside. However, what we discovered when we were there is that the people are fantastic. And they love to make relationships and they love to make them work. And that's why we keep going back. Because they know us, they applaud us. Remember itself has 1,200 volunteers that come between the month of March to the end of September. They stop in September hosting groups of people up to 45 a week of the volunteers, which is what we're called, because snow usually starts to fly by October. So, and as you notice, the roads coming in are all hard-packed sand. So if there's a big rain, it's ruts and you can't get out. If there's any snow, there's nobody that comes and plows. So it's all kind of a thing. This is the bunkhouse. This is where we have dinner. On the one side, on the left, are the men's dorm, and the right side are women. There is our group from this past year. So we had a wonderful time. There we are. Those of us that went this past year. This is the first year we have gone since COVID. And so it was we're a little lean. But yeah, they're the bunk rooms.
And that's, it's half and half.
Half and half. So women on one side, men are on the other. And then we're going to show you a lot of scenes just because the scenes do take our breath away at times. But the most important part about what you're going to see is the work that we do. We arrive on Saturday evening. We usually have a meal of buffalo stew, and then we go out to a powwow. When we were there this last year in August, there was the National Sioux Oglala Powwow. Then after the powwow night, then the next day is a tour day where we go through Wounded Knee and we meet Dakota Red Hawk, who is actually a descendant of someone who actually survived the Wounded Knee massacre. And so Tony's going to tell you about Wounded Knee because he's better at dates than I am.
Most of you probably know quite a lot. If you've heard of Wounded Knee, there's a ton of information available. I'm just going to briefly go through it. In 1890, the state of the Plains Indians was pretty dire. And about 25 years of American Indian wars were winding down. The reservations that had been established by original treaties were being divided up, reduced. The aforementioned Dawes Land Act allowed people to carve out the best agricultural land from the tribe. As you drive through Pine Ridge, you'll notice there's a lot of farmland that looks just like Iowa. Right across from Remember is a couple thousand acres under cultivation, a nice farmstead, big grain bins. I don't like to talk in absolutes, but none of that is owned by anyone from the tribe. It's all owned by outside people who either lease it in rare occasions or bought it through the Dawes Land Act or something similar to that. So what was left at that time was the land, sentimental value, but nobody wanted it. So that's what they were looking at. The buffalo, which was the basis of their entire lifestyle, was for all practical purposes extinct. There was disease, there was several years of crop failures, things were just awful. So, in that backdrop, you can imagine that there was some religious movements that offered some hope. The agencies, the reservations, the cavalry didn't particularly care for this idea of hope, since it may lead to a rebellion. So they decided to start rounding up, arresting, getting the people who were leaders of this movement out of the way. So, December 15th, 1890, on the Standing Rock Reservation, which is in north-central South Dakota, the agent in charge of that agency or that reservation sent 40 people to arrest Chief Sitting Bull. They got to Chief Sitting Bull. Chief Sitting Bull was willing to be arrested. The braves with him were not, as happens all the time in history, you get two people with guns, a skirmish ensues. What happens? Shots are fired. 8 people died, Sitting Bull one of them. From the native side, it was the assassination of Sitting Bull. From the other side, it was a fight resisting arrest. Take it either way. Chief Sitting Bull's half-brother was named Chief Bigfoot or Chief Spotted Elk. It depends whose source you listen to. But he was on Standing Rock. He decided he didn't want to get arrested either, so he fled. And he went south into the Badlands to hide. Once he got to the Badlands, decided the best course of action would be to take the band of Indians with him and to head on farther south to Pine Ridge, to the Pine Ridge Agency, where Chief Red Cloud and his people had already settled. So he, Chief Bigfoot, and about 300 or 350 Lakota headed south, and it's about a 75-mile trip.
It's cold.
And it's winter, it's December, it's Christmas time. And so they're heading south. The people at Pine Ridge heard there was a group of Indians coming. They didn't know their intent, so they sent out about 500 cavalry to escort them. They met at a place called Porcupine Butte, which is about 5 miles north of Wounded Knee. From there, the cavalry escorted them till the evening. They got to Wounded Knee, which is a large flat area surrounded by Wounded Knee Creek, and there they were going to set up camp for the night. And they did. One of the geographical features of this area was there is a hill overlooking the encampment. The cavalry put 4 Hotchkiss guns on top of the hill, and these are artillery cannons, small cannons. They fire either an explosive projectile or buckshot or grape shot, which is a shell about this long. You can put 25, let's say, marble-sized pieces of shot in there. In the hands of a competent cavalry unit, that gun can fire 15 or 20 rounds per minute. So 4 of those guns are on a hill overlooking the encampment. This is actually the encampment from the hill, or where it would be. The hill will become known as Cemetery Hill. We'll see that just in a moment. So the next day, the cavalry decided that before taking the band of Lakota to Pine Ridge, they needed to be disarmed. So they asked the Indians to disarm. A few guns came out. The cavalry was a little skeptical that that's all there was, so they went into the camp. They started searching teepees, bundles, things like that. What happens when you have armed groups meet each other? You have a little scuffle, a shot rang out, and literally all hell broke loose. In the next 5 minutes, everything in the camp was dead. The Hotchkiss guns opened up, they shot everything, anything, didn't matter. One of the troopers who was there wrote later, said, I looked up after 10 minutes at the camp and there was nothing alive. Men, women, children, horses, dogs, nothing. 36 cavalrymen were killed. Most of them were killed by the Hotchkiss guns. The Indians that escaped, there were some that got away, were hunted down by the cavalry. Bodies were found up to 3 miles from Pine Ridge, shot by the cavalry. The numbers are hard to pin down, but the general, I'll give you the average, is that 200 Lakota were killed, of which 80 or 90 were men, the rest women and children. Another 50 wounded, many of whom died later, and 50 survivors. In the history of South Dakota, there were 5 members of the armed forces who were awarded a Medal of Honor in World War I, World War II, Korea, or Vietnam. 5. In Wounded Knee, 20 cavalry members were awarded the Congressional Medals of Honor. In the Defense Appropriation Bill last year, there was an amendment to strip those Medals of Honor. It's been going on for 20 years. They still have them. So neither here nor there. So after the massacre, that sign actually used to say the Battle of Wounded Knee. The Lakota tribe kept painting over it until they finally just put massacre, which is what it was. A blizzard blew in that night. The troops returned to Pine Ridge. 3 days later, they hired a group of civilians to go back out and collect the bodies. They went out, they went up on top of the hill where the Hotchkiss guns were, they dug a pit, a trench, threw the bodies in, and that's there today. There is another grave, and I might as well do that while we're here. When they were picking up the bodies 3 days later, they turned over a dead woman. Underneath her was a 5-month-old baby. Lost bird. She had survived with actually just mild frostbite. She had been covered with bear grease, which was a Lakota way to insulate their children when it was cold. She was actually one of 6 babies picked up after after Wounded Knee. They took her back to Pine Ridge, where she was placed with a Lakota family. There was a general who was in charge of the cleanup 3 days later, decided it'd be great if he had a memento of his service at Wounded Knee, so he went and took her. His story is he adopted her, the Lakota story is he kidnapped them. You can take it either way again. The fact that he took her and then he invited all of his friends to come and view her as a memento or a relic of what happened at Wounded Knee would make me think that perhaps the kidnapping was probably closer to the truth. So they sent her to a number of different boarding schools. Her mother loved her and tried her best for her. Her father didn't care after a while, so he actually left with her nanny to go live somewhere else. Eventually her mom ran out of money, sent her to live with her dad. Her dad abused her. It was a terrible story. And anyway, she ended up penniless in California. 20 years later, she'd worked at the Buffalo Bill Wild West show as an exhibit and things like that. It's just a terrible story. Anyway, she died penniless in a pauper's grave in California. In 1970, they finally found where she had been buried. They exhumed her remains and they brought her back to bury her at Pine Ridge. She is symbolic, emblematic, an example of tens of thousands of Lakota children who were taken from their families and their homes and their villages and sent to boarding schools, never to come back. It's a sad, sad story, but that's enough of you. Anyway, but the rest of it's great.
Anyway, this is one of the national powwow that we got to be a part of this last year. It's a 3-day event. There's a rodeo. There's all sorts of different competitions that go on. So each different tribe within the Lakota family creates drum circles, and they have competitions as who can do the best drumming and the singing. And so they perform all day long, 12 hours a day for 4 days. And it's amazing. And while they're performing, then there's dancers out on the field, and they're being judged, and they have all sorts of competitions. And so you can see it's incredible. The beating, the handwork in each of the costumes is remarkable. And every tribe is so proud of what they're able to do. These are some of the children. We have to have permission to take their pictures, but they were, especially when they're in their ceremonial dress, they are just so proud to be able to model for you. So this went on. We were there for most of the afternoon. This is one of the dances that's done. There's a prairie dance. It's done before a hunting season, going up for the buffalo. And they're so friendly. They'll come up and talk to you. Carson and I were sitting on the ground, and all of a sudden these 2 little 3-year-olds came up and just tackled us and threw us to the ground. And then they started taking our picture, and I thought, oh gosh, they're going to take this phone home to their parents, and they're going to go, who is this white-haired lady and this little red-haired kid on our phone? But they're just so open and so just so excited to share who they are and what they have to offer, and it was beautiful. It was a beautiful day.
The young and old, you know, and it's...
Here we are. This was right after Tony and Penny went and had buffalo kidney tacos.
Oh, delicious.
Tony and Betsy, sorry, yeah. I passed on that.
Penny does not want to be that other going.
Yeah. There's a little guy just getting warmed up. He's got a 3-year-old. It's just like learning to dance.
Oh, cute.
Yeah. It's remarkable. Okay, then you come back and you break into groups. So out of the 40 volunteers that were there, they have like 5 or 6 groups, and so you never quite know. But there's people from all over the world who come and volunteer. And so you always have a chore. And so like if you're in group 1 on Sunday night, you have duty, which means you have to go wash dishes. And then in the morning you have breakfast duty or lunch duty or whatever. So everybody is expected to do their jobs, and this was the lunch line. Then in the evening, every evening we're there, they have bring in Lakota elders to speak to us about the stories of the Lakota, and it's remarkable. The first night we have a gentleman by the name of Anila Wakan. He's very, very political. Always talks about, he goes up on the hill behind Remember and prays first for whatever message he's supposed to deliver to us that evening. But he's very, very, very knowledgeable. He's traveled all over the world. This one up here happens to be Uncle Will Peters, who he began a flute society. He's a teacher at Pine Ridge High School, and he is teaching Lakota culture to the children because so many of the kids do not get it from home anymore. The acculturation of the white society has kind of begun to take over, but he doesn't want them to lose the Lakota language. And so he teaches Lakota language and the customs. Following him, then we always are following the speakers, then we always run up to the top of the hill to catch the sunset because it's beautiful. So you can see on the far right there, that's kind of the buildings of Remember. We've got the bunkhouse that we showed you, and then there is the shop, which is down below. And there's another bunkhouse that's used for overflow, and then the director's cottage. So that's kind of just the little bit of land that we sit on. But we get to see all of this. And that ridge there, that bluish-gray ridge halfway, or two-thirds of the way up, is Nebraska. So we can see Nebraska we're 7 miles from the Nebraska border. Here we have breakfast again.
And these slides are arranged kind of in
the days,
yeah.
How we go through the day. So coffee's ready by 6:30, which is good.
And then
they're making toast.
This is Tom making
Tom
toast,
Burger.
And then
you feed it in and it pops out the other end. It's like a whole different experience.
This was a little dramatized.
There's Carson going down to work. So that white building in the background is the shop. And what's really cool about Remember is you can see how red the dirt is. We had rain the night before, so it was really muddy. Now we're at one of the work sites. So the groups break up into 4 or 5 different work groups every day, and you always get switched around to a different job. So he and Gary Kloss right there were skirting a trailer. The bad part is that there were some FEMA trailers after Katrina that were so bad that they couldn't take them down to New Orleans, so they took them out to the reservation. And so a lot of these FEMA trailers were just kind of set on blocks and left. So now Remember's going back and insulating and putting skirting around them, because when you got 30 mile an hour winds and it's 30 below zero and it's a Dakota winter, if you can put a little bit of skirting around your trailer, it keeps it a whole lot warmer. So that's what they were doing.
Everyone uses power tools.
We all get the experience, and the thing is, for us as adults, that we know what's going on, it's really nice for the kids to be able to learn. I mean, we're always supposed to, everybody gets a chance to do all the jobs. So you can see how they built the wooden frame, and then they put insulation in. A lot of times, now this is a double wide, and this home probably houses 16 people. And I don't know if there's running water at this place or electricity. Over half the homes on Pine Ridge Reservation do not have running water, because the water that would come down from the north side of the reservation is runoff from a mining place. So there's tailings, or 8 tailings, and so they can't drink that water. So the water has to be pumped up from Nebraska. And the Bureau of Indian Affairs is very slow about getting that done. So if you don't have water, then you more likely probably don't have electricity either, because you got to have a well.
There it shows how it's just setting on blocks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
this is Mike's toad.
This is what I get to talk about. This is a toad right here. And
he's a big one.
I have never seen a toad that it was as big as my hand. You can see it. It was amazing. I just had to take a picture of it. And, as you work under some of these places or around them, I've always been afraid of what kind of snakes are we?
Yeah, we got rattlesnakes and they've got black widow spiders, and so sometimes you gotta send somebody you don't really like underneath the shed.
You know, that explains so very much.
No, actually, well, you'll see a picture of Bill, one of the shop crewmen, and he'll tell you there's a prairie dog. You can't eat them. There's a ton of them, but you can't eat them because they've got some poisonous oil in them that will kill you. So they'd be great food. But every place has stray dogs. There are dogs that run the res all over the place, and they're just starved for attention and for food, as you can see. But it's not unusual for most homes to have dogs everywhere. So, this trailer actually turned out looking pretty good, and it's pretty cleaned up around it. There's a lot of them that aren't. They don't throw things away. They just kind of leave them to rust.
And as you turn around and look just the other way from the trailer, here's the cemetery.
Yeah.
And again,
Dogs everywhere.
dogs and, yeah.
How many people live here?
On Pine Ridge,
It's hard to say, but up to 20,000. They come and go quite a bit.
Really?
they're transient, yeah. Looking for work.
Are they a Christian group?
Pardon?
Are they a Christian group?
They,
Remember is not.
No, they were started by a Episcopalian group of people, but their job is not to evangelize. Although it's interesting because there's a huge Catholic population on the res of natives, and they do a lot of trying to juxtapose the Lakota faith with their faith. They all talk about God, and they all recognize Jesus Christ as God's son. So we don't talk a lot about it with them unless they bring it up. We've met some really wonderful people, a woman especially at Art Night, who talked about her son who was able to live with a missionary family and was able to get an education at Iowa State. And she was very, very faith-filled and talked about it a lot. But not everybody does.
They seem to have crosses at the cemetery. Is that what it's on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Marks the graves.
I just want to tell us one quick story about one of the Lakota chiefs, and I can't remember his name right off the top of my head, but his words to a Catholic priest were, "Our God is wise enough to know when I call his name."
Mm-hmm.
So he calls to the God in his language, and our God is wise enough to recognize his language too, as well as Latin.
Well, con to con.
Right.
And Peter alluded to it, but there's also been Christian groups on the reservation that have gone to do work, and the work is, again, the aid you get from that organization is dependent upon you attending church every Sunday, or your children being baptized, or their promises made that aren't fulfilled. So there is absolutely a negative connotation in some of those from groups that promised and didn't deliver.
Right.
Or your children are taken away.
Yeah, so they emphasizes you need to be careful about that simply because you don't know the history of the people you're talking to.
If they ask, you can be honest, but that's where we go.
But you can't wear anything that has Christian markings
No.
on it.
Right.
And you don't wear anything that says nothing that says Chiefs, Braves, no sports teams. Yeah, I mean, we have to be very respectful of who we're working with. This is one of the last times they were able to do a roof. You can see there's people up on the roof. The trailers anymore are so in such poor shape we can no longer do roofing. But roofing was one of the jobs we got to do the first couple of years we went. But the roofs were so bad now, liability and insurance purposes, we can't do that. Remember has their own crew that they will send in of just their people to do roofs, but the volunteers, we can no longer do roofs. But handicap ramps, because diabetes is a huge problem, so they need to be able to get into their trailers. And so that's why they do the handicap ramps. And that's a huge thing. I think when I was there last year, we built 4 of them, and that we were there.
But there's currently a 2-year waiting list.
Yeah,
so if you have a wheelchair and you have a step and you ask for a member to do it, you will wait at least 2 years before they will come and be able to help you.
Just because there's such a need. Yep. See, there's somebody going under to check.
Christy's young charge checking for snacks.
We're just here. Those legs look familiar.
Yeah. Again, that's the roof of a trailer that we did a couple years, 2 years into our. There's Tony.
I'm exhausted.
It's hard work, and everybody has to
And then the next, no.
Then we wake up and we go to dinner.
Is there any chance that buffalo will be introduced up there?
There are
There
buffalo
are
in the
buffalo.
Badlands.
There are small herds that are being started. Plus, they do have a buffalo count out at Custer every year that runs through the national park.
Yeah.
And that's actually on the reservation land now, where they do the count. So you can go out.
There's also a young man who started a buffalo meat market, and he brings the kids in, and they actually butcher the buffalo. They see them kill it, they see how to use it, all the parts.
And
of
they
it.
give us the kidneys.
And they
where we
give
got
us
them
the
from.
kidneys, that's all we want. And he's actually applied federally to be able to sell it by mail order. So you may see it someday. He's done quite a bit of entrepreneurial work on them.
It's amazing. There's only 2 grocery stores on the reservation, and the food is so expensive nobody can afford it. So remember, in the last 5 years has begun CSA gardens, and now they've been able to take. I can't remember how many tons of food they were able to deliver this year to the natives, which was amazing, just an amazing thing. This is Larry Swally. He comes and tells the creation story, the Lakota creation story, and he does a slide presentation and sings. All of our people who come to do all of the elders who come in the evening sing, and it's amazing to hear their voices, because it's not what we would consider singing, but I wish we had a recording of it. It would be neat. And then again, we go up the hill at night to say goodnight to the sun. Yay! Jumping for joy. These kids were that group of kids that we took made a huge impression on the Remember staff. Gunther Sandersville was in that group, and he said to the people, I was here last year and I built an outhouse. I think I could do it again. And they actually let him lead a crew of outhouse building, and it was amazing, because you'll see, they cranked out outhouses that day like nothing. And it's amazing to think that that's what people will use for 5 years before, because there's no running water, there's no toilets, it's all done.
Where does the wood come from?
They actually, Remember, goes up to Rapid City, which they call racist city. Rapid City is very anti-Indian, but Remember, it's the only place that they can get wood, and they bring down trailers full and just park them down by the shed, and then we use the wood all summer. So this is the shop. They've got things so organized, and they've got 2 Native American men who run it, and their story is amazing as well. Last summer when we were there, one of them lost an ancestor to old age, and another one's brother was shot after a card game that week we were there, and he went home, came back, and we never knew about it till the end of the week.
Well, and you see, one of the elders that talked had a daughter that was lost as Native American women have been disappearing, and they don't know where they're going.
Right.
He had a granddaughter that
Yeah.
was one of the women that had disappeared, and they still don't know where it happened, if she got killed or what. And that's been a big deal. You'll see it sometimes. They have an organization that's trying to find them.
And actually, the Will Peters, the one gentleman who we have a slide of, he actually has won an Indian Grammy Award.
Yeah.
He writes music, and he has 3 or 4 albums out. And then at Pine Ridge, he also began a flute society, which they look a lot like a recorder, but they're much more mellower tone. And they won an Emmy or Grammy in the Lakota award. I can't remember.
It's like Grammy, but it's a different word.
It's a different word for it, yeah. But they were very, very proud of them. It was an amazing accomplishment. Okay.
In the shop here, they build when we're here. It'll be
Bunk beds,
and then we'll be doing the
outhouses.
outhouse frames, and
That's just Andrea out of the way from everybody.
With a very sharp tool.
with a sharp.
She was actually rounding the edges of a bunk bed rail. So these are the outhouses. This is how it all starts. You build the frame, and then you start putting it all together. And Gunther was organizing this like nothing. So that's the side of an outhouse. And then you slap a couple coats of paint on. You have to set the outhouse. So that's Allison. So it's almost 6 feet deep. You dig a hole about 2.5 by 2.5.
She and I dug that, and it was not about 6 feet, it was exactly 6
And what's hard is sometimes you'll start and you'll get down about 2 feet, and then you'll hit rock, and you can't go through, so then you gotta start all over again. Yeah, so here we are delivering an outhouse.
And this outhouse, we were driving down the road, and it lifted up and went back and sat between the end gate and the trailer. So there was additional excitement with this thing.
Carry it up.
Deliver to the hole, set it, and
There, yeah.
little house on the prairie. And then you gotta try it.
We do put a door on it. There's a door that goes on the outhouse.
Yeah.
It's just a set of stairs. A lot of times the trailers had a door in the front and the back, and there was just access maybe to one, and so then often just for safety and fire purposes, we tried to put a second escape, I guess.
And a big part is sharing, here's a young lady, and here she's probably 4
Those are
or
the
5.
families, yeah. That's
And then that's the
the mom.
dad, I believe, or mom, I can't see from here.
So it's interesting, I think people should know that we walk a very fine line. People aren't always that appreciative of what we're doing because we're also the white people that put them in this situation. So if you go there, it's not all, happy and roses. There are times when we walk into homes where there might be one person in that home that isn't very friendly or doesn't really want you there while someone else does. So I think it makes us think all week about where our values are and what we believe in. And, if you choose to go, and I would encourage anyone to go, it is important to understand that, I think, when you walk on. I did not know that, and it surprised me.
And that's a big part of the hill time. In the beginning of the week, the hill time, what we're always talking about is looking forward, and then by midweek, you're thinking about all you've done and what you've learned, and you can see this trailer, by the way, is skirted too.
Mm-hmm.
But, and then at the end of the week, it's more reflection, but the hill time is really, really amazing.
So then so the land that Remember sits on now is leased, and the family that would like them to move on to their own spot. Plus, it's also in Pine Ridge, which is not very centrally located to the entire reservation. So they were Remember has been able now to purchase land more central on the reservation around a town named Kyle, and they are starting to build. So that first building was one of the new houses, administrative houses. These are 2 of the hoop buildings. They got a grant from the federal government, and this is where they're starting now to grow some of the crops. Peppers, tomatoes, onions, and then there is this huge Lakota gourd that's about the size of a pumpkin, and it can feed a family a lot. You can do a lot with it. So there are something where they're learning about different plants. This is an outdoor garden, which, even though they've had a lot of rain, didn't do real well. But
And they do it with South Dakota State University.
yes, the extension office, SDSU's extension office, has also got a place shared. Wednesday night is Crafters Night. We invite 30 to 40 different artists from around the reservation if they've got the gas money to come, and they can set up a picnic table like you can see here, and they can sell their artwork. Bracelets, jewelry of all different sorts, paintings, drawings, fry bread. The lady on the right is Nyla Red Cloud. She is our chef, our cook for the week at Remember, and that's her daughter. And she makes fry bread that certainly makes ours look pretty pathetic. But she also makes a thing called wajupi, which is a choke cherry sauce that you get to dip your bread into, and it's amazing. So there's the sky. There's always a thunderstorm when we're out there. It looks just like that. It blows over real fast. Morning coffee again with Gary. Morning sky.
Back up on the hill and then load
Then back
the
up, and we
trailers.
load up again. Every morning we load the trailers, and then we head out to different places. I cannot remember how many thousands of miles they cover. And then in the winter months when the volunteers aren't there, the 8 people that stay on staff, Remember, are out delivering firewood. They are delivering over 120 different loads of firewood all around the reservation. They put thousands of miles on their trucks. because most people, people have cut up their new bunk beds. People have cut up their outhouses to burn on cold winters because they just don't get, gas doesn't get around to them.
And during the blizzard not this past winter, but the one before, it got so bad because nobody plows the roads that they couldn't get back, and I believe they lost 8 people that died, froze to death because they could not get wood to heat the trailer.
So there's Betsy talking up the van full of guys going to a job.
Yes, trying to just figure out who's gonna dig that hole.
This was bunk delivery day.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
We get stuck. That happens a lot too. We get stuck. Well, so this is a very nice trailer, the interior of a bedroom. They take the platforms in, they take the sides in, and then you construct the bed within the home. Then we deliver a mattress. Hope College out of Michigan donates all the mattresses they use every year. The semi-load of mattresses comes in. People donate brand new sheets, bedding. So every bed gets the whole 9 yards. You get the pillow, you get the sheets, you get a blanket, and if you're a child, you get a set of books. Your very first books that you get to keep.
This was the first or second year I was there. This is one of the best memories I have. We delivered bunk beds in a basement of a home, and there were 4 little girls down there, 2 6- or 7-year-old twins, and they had individual beds, and they told us this is the first night in their life they get to sleep in a bed. They've been sleeping on a blanket in the home.
And we delivered this past year, Betsy and I did, and we started out in a home that was fairly clean. It was these young ladies here who were going to get the bed, and then we went to another home, and the last home you're going to see in a little bit, it was gut-wrenching. It was just, I just felt so sad.
And every piece of that wood that you see has been touched by somebody, every member that's been cut, it's been sanded all around corners, all the little triangles that kind of keep everything steady. So there's a lot of work that goes into each one, but there's so much satisfaction in delivering them and giving them a place to lay their heads that's safe and warm. Lunch, always on the work days, lunch is in the back of the trailer, and if you're lucky that a dog doesn't come and eat it before you get to it, you're in good shape.
Once again, I'm organizing the men.
Solving the world's problems.
Yeah.
Kitchen boss.
This is also a nice one, right?
Yeah, this lady had, I think it was 3 or 4 grandchildren living with her. So we delivered bunks there.
Which is not an uncommon thing. It's a very maternalistic society. Women run everything. Both because of traditionally, culturally, that's true, and also because one year, I think the statistic was by the age of 25, 90% of the men have been incarcerated at some point in their life.
And the average lifespan for a man on the reservation is 43.
Yeah.
And did you talk about the banking?
Yeah, see, that's.
There's no banks, so
No.
there are no banks on the reservation.
There are now. I mean, that's some
There are
improvements.
no
There are, those things, there are improvements, which we'll touch on later, but for a long time, there was nothing. No banks, no grocery store, there was anything.
As you drive from place to place, you come from a trailer that's really in sad shape, and you look out the window, and it's beautiful. And
this is the church for the second Wounded Knee massacre that happened in the 70s. They moved it because it was going to, white people wanted to burn it down. But this is where the Native Americans sought shelter while the FBI came in because they were fearing another uprising. Here's another trailer.
This is the last trailer that we did. This is in the middle of the town of Pine Ridge. And you can see there, it's up on blocks, no skirting. I
No
think
steps?
in this one, here's the outhouse.
Yep.
And here are the bunks we put in. I don't know, how many people were in their beds?
At least 7 or 8. They had a bed in the living room.
And there was one young man that was, I don't know if he was sleeping or what, but he was on the floor, and it was just, and this room had, I think, 2 bunk beds in it, maybe, and then this is about what these young
All their possessions.
That's what they own.
The other interesting part is that alcoholism, believe it or not, is on the decline on the res. Only because there used to be, just across the border in Nebraska was a town called White Clay. There was a little gas station there that sold 1 million cans of beer to the Native American people, and they took them back over. The government closed them down. So there's no longer 1 million cans of beer coming from White Clay onto the reservation. So that problem is being addressed, which is a good sign. However, you can still find a lot of alcohol coming in. One of the most horrific moments I had was 2 years ago. We found a man laying in the middle of the road. He was just passed out drunk and wanting just to have somebody run him over. And we came upon him in the morning, and we stopped. We called the ambulance to come get him, and they said, "Is he an Indian?" And our crew chief said, "Well, yes, please, just come get him." And they said, "Well, we'll get around to it." They never came, but we did track down his family, and his family came and got him and took him home. But that's really, I mean, on the reservation, and there's so little care for people. And so I don't know, it's heartbreaking, and yet it's so satisfying when you can reach out and show them that not everybody is there to hurt them. And that's a good thing. This is Corey. He was a retired director. This last year was his last year. He's going on to do some political work for the Democratic Party. And Will, I think, the picture with Betsy talking to the men, Will is the new director stepping in.
This is the beginning of the last day then, and this was a tour day.
Yeah. So you go to the Badlands. There's Gary, the Sheik. And then we go down into this, what they call the, sanctuary. I was thinking, not the church, the sanctuary. And we are instructed to kind of just close our eyes, and for anywhere from 15 to 25 minutes, just meditate, pray, whatever it is that we need to do to just feel thankful for the opportunity to have been there to work. And it's a wonderful, wonderful opportunity just to reflect on what's going on. Carson found a fossil.
Oh, found a dinosaur fossil.
A dinosaur
They had to
fossil.
haul it in, and they had to get the Latin lung of it because they had
Yeah.
to report it. Yeah, it was cool.
And this is how you test if it's a fossil. If it sticks to your tongue, if it sticks to your tongue, it's a fossil.
I'm like, you know what? I don't need it that bad.
There's the,
There they are.
yep. The archaeologist Elise told us that, and so now we test all of our rocks.
I know.
All of us taking our time. We get to do some climbing. And then we go to a place called Betty's Kitchen. Betty was a black elk. The book Black Elk Speaks. She is a granddaughter of Black Elk, and her family has land up on top of a butte, which is beautiful. And she cooks for us one meal every week for the volunteers. And so taco fried bread or chicken strips or whatever, and everything is homemade. And so we get a treat by getting to go.
She's actually open for anyone. So
Yeah.
she has a restaurant. We buy our lunches there.
Mm-hmm.
So we stop there. But anybody who goes through, you could look for it, and it's very authentic cooking. If you want to go get more food or get dessert, you go into her home, into her kitchen, and pick out what you want. So
Yeah,
it's not exactly a commercial kitchen.
No, it's, yeah.
And the area around her, just around.
Grasslands,
it's
yeah.
just spectacular. This is the
That's
view
the view, yeah. It's a nice little outdoor gazebo kind of thing for us. And dogs, more dogs. Here we are, having our fill of fry bread. And then we went up to the Red Cloud School. Red Cloud School is a private high school that was begun by Jesuits. And there's another cemetery there. They were actually, this last summer when we were there, they were digging because it was one of those schools where they were worried that they had taken students and buried them. It was a boarding school at one time. So they were doing land. They did not find any bodies on the property. We were very thankful for it. But they always host a huge nationwide, Indian nationwide art show, and it's just beautiful. This is some of the work that they see. It's for sale. You can purchase pieces if you want, but it's cool. And now it is a private college, and actually they have three. 5 years ago when we were there, they had 3 Gates scholars that came out of that school. Melinda and Bill Gates' scholarships they were given for their study. It's a very prestigious school. And then we go to a place called Singing Horse Trading Post. Again, this is a woman from Germany who married a Native American gentleman, and they began this business. So you can have horse pictures on a horse, or you can stay. She has a bed and breakfast as well. And then she also hosts different artists on her porch and sells basic needs for art materials for some of the Native Americans and anybody else who's interested in buying. And there's our little warrior.
That's it.
Questions?
Did you talk about the banking?
Oh no, talk about the banking, Tony.
Let's just say that it's a pretty dire picture you heard, but just in the time that I've gone, I mean, I think there are improvements. You're starting from a subsistence level.
Mm-hmm.
So there was never a bank. Now there are a couple of banks. There's a mobile bank and a regular bank. There's a grocery store with fresh fruit and vegetables, which wasn't there the first time I was there. There's a couple of convenience stores, which we take Casey's for granted, right? But they never had such a thing. There's ATMs now. There are people who have done. There's a Subway and
there's a
Pizza Hut,
coffee
they're
shop.
flying.
There's a coffee shop even.
Yeah.
Yes.
You talked about the leased land though, right? Tony, you
Yeah.
talked about that. They're all on leased land. They can't get a loan.
No,
So
they
That's
they
can't.
the
cannot go to the bank and get a loan.
It's-
So that's
They're-
really
they-
economically very
why that
difficult.
The Indians are part of the natural resource. They're not considered actual property. The reservation is still considered a POW camp.
But it's important to note that the North Dakota, South Dakota, and Minnesota state governments, banking laws preclude banks from making loans to indigenous people who are on any form of subsistence.
Correct.
It is actually against the law for them to make a loan. So it's virtually impossible for any Native American in Minnesota, South Dakota, or North Dakota to ever start and own their own business. And the other, you don't really think about systemic racism in our country because we just don't believe it happens. But for example, just last year, Bob and I were in Shadow, Nebraska, and the state park there called Fort Reynolds is the fort where the Wounded Knee soldiers, the cavalry, the U.S. cavalry went from Fort Reynolds, or Fort Robinson, excuse me, it's called Fort Robinson. Went from Fort Robinson. When you go to the museum there that's operated by the U.S. government, they call it the Uprising at Wounded Knee. And that entire museum was totally redone not that long ago. And they still call it the Uprising at Wounded Knee and do not talk about how many people. And then the other thing that I find really crazy is if you look at a map of South Dakota, and this is true also of the Navajo Reservation and the Zuni Reservation, there are no state roads there. There are federal roads, but there are no state roads because the state passed laws stating that they would not build any roads in the reservation unless certain criteria were met. That mean that they can never have a state road. They will never have a paved road until those laws change in South Dakota and North Dakota, and frankly, also in Minnesota. And the reason now in South Dakota, there's been some movement about changing those laws, but not much.
And when we go, there's a long piece of paper. It's probably as long as the wall that you see here in front of you from the top to the bottom. And it is in small handwriting every treaty that's ever been broken by the United States government with Native people. And there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. And you start to understand how people become unable to even muster the ability to try to make things better for themselves because it's just never happened.
Like companies want to make investment there, they don't have electricity, they don't have a road. So, at this day and age, could you imagine if Des Moines, well, I actually could imagine imagine Des Moines doing this. But yeah, if you could imagine Des Moines saying, we will not maintain or upkeep or build a new road in all of Iowa County, ever, again.
Right.
I mean, that could be just devastating to us.
It is hard.
Yeah, that's mind blowing to me.
How much money do they receive as an allotment?
You know, it's interesting, and it's a hard thing to put a thing on because they don't really get an allotment for being an Indian. There are federal programs that aren't a whole lot different than the federal programs that are available to anyone below the poverty level.
Right.
That gives them a subsistence living. Unlike some tribes, which have income. I mean, the tribe, they do get a tribal allotment, the tribal income, let me back up. One of the problems that they have, I think, is that the tribal government has never been a particularly effective advocate for the people.
Right.
It's changing some now, but generally it's one of the best jobs on the reservation. And like every political system anywhere, your job as a politician is to make sure you remain a politician. So you give jobs to your family and your friends and your supporters. And so there is some income the tribe gets from leases, mineral rights, things like that, that is allotted to the people living there. It's a very small amount, way less than $1,000 a person.
The average income, I'm sorry, Tony, but the average income, yearly income for a family on the reservation is $8,000 a year.
For a family.
For a family. So if you're taking care of 14 grandkids and, you know, some disabled other people, $8,000 doesn't go very far.
And they don't really have, the Lakota don't really have casinos. They
Well,
don't.
They do, but nobody
They
goes
have
there
one,
because it's
but
like
they-
literally the
it's
middle
not
of
very
nowhere.
popular because
Right.
they don't serve alcohol.
Yeah, I was just gonna say,
People
it's
come there.
small,
It's,
it's there.
So,
but-
I mean, like food stamps, things like that, they get that, they're, you know, but
Yeah,
as far as actually
it's
getting
hard
money
organized to do that.
or
They're- they
the
don't
treaty
have investment.
requirements, those are,
And food
Well,
stamps
our
are hard.
welfare program for like us is better than those.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
there's no social security because they don't pay into it.
You're
I
right.
mean, how do
No.
you get
yeah,
social security?
but again, you have to,
Yeah.
at some point, you have to have an address and a phone and a bank and a mailbox, I mean, all those things that,
And somewhere that somebody.
you know, they're literally starting at
We treat them worse than the blacks.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
It's
They're considered no
We'll
different than
think
any wild
The
animal.
majority of the land they live on is in a trust. They don't own it, it's in a trust, actually.
So, I mean, you say, well, put in a septic. Why would I do that? I don't own my house. I can't get a home equity loan because I don't own my home. I don't own any property. I can't.
Plus,
So
they
there's
don't
really
have
no
the
incentive.
electricity to run a
Yeah,
pump.
even if you do, there's no incentive for it. It's a hard deal.
Yeah.
Has there been a peace treaty signed with them yet?
Yes, as a matter of fact, there is, and there was a court case in the 80s, I want to say the late 80s, that awarded them a cash settlement for the fact that the government stole the Black Hills from them when they found gold. That trust fund, or that money was put into whatever, escrow, whatever they do with it. And it's worth about $1.5 billion now.
They can't
But the
get it.
tribe, and I can see both sides of this, but the tribe won't take that. To do that would say that the Black Hills no longer belongs to them. The Black Hills is sacred to them as any of our property, church buildings, Ronneberg, whatever you want to say, it doesn't matter. I mean, it's more than, it's their creation story, it's the foundation of their entire culture.
They accept the money that
If they take the money, then they are acknowledging the Black Hills no longer belongs to them.
And they don't want to give that up.
So, but the flip side is $1.5 billion would do probably a lot of good.
But
the
then
Pine
there's
Ridge
people
Reservation,
who
but-
argue that even if they went to claim that they wouldn't get it.
Well, probably
Because,
not.
yeah, they figure out a way not to give it.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
And like I said, that Dawes Act that they mentioned was a terrible thing. I mean, all
Yeah.
the farmland is gone.
But one of you mentioned something about POWs yet.
Yeah, they're still recognized on the books in the government as POW Camp 133. That's what it's considered. And that's why Rapid City, they have such trouble in Rapid City, because if you go off the reservation, you can be arrested. You have no rights. So if you go to Rapid City, which is not a reservation town, if somebody's in a pissy mood, they can certainly call a cop and you could be taken to jail. You won't be kept, but you could be hassled enough for being off the reservation. So it's difficult. We are going back though. We're going back in August, the 3rd to the 9th. If anybody's interested in going, we have 10 spots reserved as of right now. We could probably grab a couple more if there are enough people interested. It's $775 for the week. That covers your costs, including your meals. It covers your transportation. It covers everything we do when we're out there, other than what you want to buy for souvenirs or for a remembrance of your trip. Just let Betsy or I or Tony or Mike or Penny know. I mean, Penny and Susan and Andrew, you've all been. Heidi, you can represent your family because Mike and Gunther have both been. So we've had several people here who have gone. Carson, where are you? There you are. Carson's been. He was just there last year. Had a great time. He was nervous because he was the only kid we took along, and he was like, I'm going with all these adults. But he was everybody's favorite by the end of the week, so it was nice. He could deal cards, and he was a card shark at night with other kids that were there. It was great. So we are more than happy to take, if you're interested in going along. It's a really wonderful week. Talk to anybody who's been. They'll tell you stories, the things that have touched our hearts. And this will be my 10th time going, and I cannot imagine not going. It's my happy place.
Well, are there things that can be contributed, or are you limited on space?
Well, we are limited, possibly. It depends how many we take and what we drive out there. But like I said, brand new quilts, bedding, pillows, school supplies are always welcome. You can actually just, if you want addresses, like if you want to just put things on, Remember has an Amazon wish list that you can go and look at, and they give you the address of where to ship it to. Depending if you're sending in things through the post office or sending things UPS, there's a couple different addresses. But yeah, we sent like 1 year for Vacation Bible School, we had the kids bring in school supplies. We filled up an entire tub of, swimming pool full of stuff, and we boxed it up and sent it out because they do a backpack stuffing, before school starts. At Christmas time, you can send new toys. Anila Wakan, one of our speakers, hosts a Santa Claus. He dresses up like Santa and takes things to the schools and hands out to the kids. So there's always, they never
In the
say
winter,
no.
they ask for donations for wood.
Yeah, cash donations
Cash
to pay
to
for
fund
fire.
it.
Get
Yeah.
online and just
Remember.
to remember and
Yeah.
cash donation.
We can put it in the church we can put it in the church newsletter.
Yeah.
Remember.org.
And a lot of times that if we get donations from the church, we will put it together like a Lowe's or a Menards card, so then they can buy supplies for all the outhouses or beds or whatever they're doing.
We gave them a really nice check last year that actually paid for our entire week of building supplies. The church has been very, 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 very generous, and we are very thankful that we've been able to make those donations. They go a long ways. It's good. Thank you all.